Good morning. My name is Pam Eiler. Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of San Antonio. Our weekly worship is an important way for us to connect, to be together, and to receive information and inspiration. At our church, we believe that we are united by universal love that binds us in mutual care and affection in our work for justice for all and for our planet. Our faith is all inclusive and all means all. If you are new with us today, we welcome you wherever you are in your life's journey. We hope you will find your place with us.
Winds be still, storm clouds pass and silence come. Peace grace this time with harmony. Thy bird of hope and shine, light of love, and in calm let all find tranquility. Birds fly high, lift our gaze towards distant view, help us to sense life's mystery. Fly high and far, and lead us each to see how we move through the winds of eternity. Light shining, illuminate our inward view. Help us to see with clarity. Shine bright and true, so we may join our songs into songs that become full symphony.
Today's chalice lighting words are entitled For Those Who Serve by Cynthia Landrum. In honor of those who have served and those who continue to serve, at home and abroad, for peace and in war, we light our chalice and we offer our thanks. Let's recite our covenant that binds us together as a religious community. The words can be found below the video on your screen. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity and fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other.
Hello everyone, my name is Tavis McGinn, and it's been my pleasure to be a YRUU Youth Advisor for the past 8 years. But what I'm here to do today is to talk about the Wade Richmond Scholarship This is a scholarship that includes people who are chosen by church leadership and is presented to a high school senior each year. This fund is established by longtime members Jack and Laura Richmond in honor of their son Wade Richmond, who passed away while he was still a member of our church's high school youth group, and we now meet in the room dedicated to his memory. The recipient of the scholarship must not only excel academically, but is expected to exhibit the traits that the Richmonds highly prized in their son, being helpful, compassionate, thoughtful, and interested in taking a personal effort to improve the world around them. So it is my extreme pleasure to introduce Bryce Riggle as the recipient of this reward. And as I was thinking about the ways in which Bryce fully embodies what this award stands for and is all about, I am reminded of what is now technically outdated, the 6 pillars of youth ministry. These pillars are ideas and ideals that we strive for. And Bryce basically covers all of them. So thinking about how he helps with our congregational involvement, Bryce has been a part of the YAC as long as he has been able to, and he also led that group, so that keeps him involved with our church in that way. When it comes to worships, we all have seen him in the YRUU led worships. I have also seen him lead numerous worships at UBAR camp, and his special gifts to those worships are undeniable. Also, learning is a component that is supposed to be one of the 6 pillars of YRUU. And I think Bryce has done one of the best jobs I've ever seen a young person do in being a UU that wants to truly make our entire faith organization a better place. And he's done it in small ways through setting up Google Dropboxes for us to keep organized in our planning of events. And he's done it in larger ways, informing us sometimes for hours and hours on trips to and from rallies, just whatever's on his mind. But in more earnest, Bryce has been part of social action. He's definitely participated in all of the events that the YRUU has been able to put on, and has tried to do many more, including benefit concerts along the way. Not only this, but the big ones, leadership. So Bryce is, simply put, one of the best leaders of any age and any discipline that I've ever seen. Coming from a senior will and goodbye at UBAR camp, I don't think I've ever met anyone who hasn't felt positive about interacting with Bryce Riggle. He is the kind of person that makes me want to be a better person, with how he treats people with respect, with how he values input, with how he makes space to be as inclusive as anyone could possibly be. And that brings us to the last and most important, the building of community, because I think Bryce has, in a lot of ways, single-handedly kept the YRUU space open and inclusive and welcoming for at least the past 2 years, if not more. And so it is my honor to be able to speak about this young musician who goes off now to work with music in college at UT. And I just could not be more proud of being able to be a part of seeing who he is about to become, which is someone that people will be talking about for many, many years. So congratulations, Bryce, Wade Richmond Scholarship recipient 2020.
Hey Bryce, I just wanted to congratulate you on graduating. I had a blast and an absolute pleasure working with you over the summers all those years ago. I know whatever you're going to do is going to be great. Good luck with all your future endeavors.
Hey, Bryce. Congratulations on the graduation. I remember when you first came to camp a few years ago, and this small boy with this great big huge guitar case, and even back then you played surprisingly well. I was always impressed by you, and you've become more impressive every single year that I've known you. I wish you well in the future, and I hope you have a great life, and I hope I get to see you sometime.
Hello, my church friend and family. I wanted to take a few seconds here and express my joy for one of our outstanding youth. Of course, all of our youth are outstanding, each according to their own abilities. What a pleasure to work with our middle school and high school youth and watch them learn and grow and take those next steps into their lives. Bryce Riggle is one of those outstanding youth. Bryce stands out for me because of his ability to balance fun and maturity, intelligence and intuition, speaking and listening. I'm in awe of his passions, particularly for music. We also share a passion of movie watching, and I can't tell you how many debates we've had over the years on Star Trek versus Star Wars. We don't always agree, but the way Bryce listens and understands your point of view while still disagreeing is truly a lesson for us all. There were not a few times when Bryce would come to me after an event or a class and point out areas he thought we could do better, while really appreciating the effort already put in. Bryce is good with a sincere thank you, and let me tell you, that goes a long ways. Thanks, Bryce, for being there for our church. We all love you. Good luck in the future.
Kia ora and hello from New Zealand. Congratulations, Bryce Riggle, on your graduation and all those fantastic achievements. Good luck in Austin in the fall. And that's Evan in the background. If you ever get the travel bug, Bryce, feel free to come on down. We'd love to show you around. Love you. Miss you guys. Oh, whoa. Hey, Bryce.
Hey, Bryce. Sorry about the hair, man. It's
quarantine hair.
It's been a long quarantine, but hope you're doing well, and congratulations on the graduation. So, yeah, good luck on the next chapter. I'll see you later, man.
Bye.
Today's reading is from Barbara Pescan. In thanksgiving and in anguish, bless the poets and those who mourn. Send peace for the soldiers who did not make the wars, but whose lives were consumed by them. Let strong trees grow above graves far from home. Breathe through the arms of their branches. The earth will swallow your tears while the dead sing, no more, never again, remember me. For the wounded ones and those who receive them back, let there be someone ready when the memories come, when the scars pull and the buried metal moves, and forgiveness for those of us who were not there for our ignorance. And in us, veterans in a forest of 1,000 fallen promises, let new leaves of protest grow on our stumps. Give us courage to answer the cry of humanity's pain, and with our bare hands, out of full hearts, with all our intelligence, let us create the peace.
It's time to share our joys and sorrows, a longed for and honored Sunday morning rite. As we intentionally enter into our hearts and minds, may we remember that ours is a welcoming community where we find connection, a spiritual community where we make meaning. Ours is a sharing community where our joys are heard and celebrated, a caring community where our sorrows are felt and held in compassion. At this time of uncertainty, we find ourselves not only as a part of a global pandemic, yet also more deeply involved and connected to each other. Let us join in meditation, entering into the peace that silence brings, as we write our joys and sorrows on the chat screen and listen to Jaime's meditation music. Thank you, Jaime. I invite you to take a deep, cleansing breath as we share this time of reflection and prayer, borrowed in part from the Reverend Wayne Arneson. Who are here together today, we remember the many connections that sustain and uplift us in our community. We remember those who came before us and whose contributions built this free faith and who built this home for our practice. We remember those around us whose continuing care in thought and deed is an ongoing blessing in our lives, keeping the dream of our free faith alive in our time, this time of COVID. We remember those who will follow us, the children presently in our care, and those not yet come to light, who will inherit the work of our hands and hearts. As we sit surrounded by these many connections, visible and invisible, may we be reminded that every day we are not alone. And peace be with us in all our joys and sorrows, and peace to all under the sun. We pray in the name of all helpers of humankind. Amen.
10,000 Baby Names by Kathleen McTeague. When my youngest daughter was about 2 years old, she came across a tattered paperback on our bookshelves, 10,000 Baby Names, and for a little while this was her favorite book. Drawn by the shiny face of the baby on the cover, she brought it to me over and over and demanded that I read through the names. This was prelude to what was at the time her favorite story of all, how we chose her name. What's in a name? Always there is a story. You are named for a beloved relative, or contrarily, named after no one because your parents wanted a clean break from family history. If you were a first son and your family went in for such things, you got to be called after your father and have junior tacked on. If you were a daughter, you could be named for a virtue or aspiration such as hope, serenity, or faith. Recalling some sweet romantic setting, your parents might have named you for their favorite Mexican, Spanish, or Italian village. Perhaps you carry the name of one of their heroes or heroines, or more whimsically, some favorite musician or movie star. Maybe you've ended up with an affectionate nickname born of a sibling's mispronunciation, or some jackass thing you tried as an adolescent and never lived down. Always there is a story. In church on Sunday morning, some have read aloud the names of the American soldiers killed in different wars each week. Alone at home, I have read the order of service, speaking each name aloud, and then wonder about their stories. I imagine these soldiers as babies, the babies they once were, held in someone's arms at a baptism or naming ceremony. The proud relatives gathered around as the name was formally bestowed, and everyone beamed as the baby cooed or wailed or fidgeted. There was so much gladness and pride in each moment of naming, and not once did anyone imagine that the road their baby walked would end in 18 or 20 years later in a mix of blood and dust halfway around the world. As part of a witness on Memorial Day during the fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, a cairn of stones was built at a busy downtown intersection in Hartford, Connecticut, each stone bearing the name of a fallen American soldier or one of the tens of thousands of Iraqi and Afghani civilians who have died in these wars. How do you choose one name from thousands to symbolize so much carnage and loss? I finally brought 3 stones to the cairn, one for each of my own 3 children. Each stone bore the name of a child who had died on the birthday of one of mine. As I placed the stones, I wondered about their names. Always there is a story. Blessed be.
It's time for our invitation to generosity. We give to remind ourselves how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are a part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music, profound words, and sacred space. We give with the faith that together we have enough. We are becoming our own version of beloved community, and I invite us all to consider the level of commitment that means. You may make an offering now on our online giving portal through the link on the screen as we enjoy our anthem from Jimmy Garrett.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, we have already come. 'Twas grace that brought us safe thus far, and grace will lead us home. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved but now I see.
Thank you, Jimmy. Our offertory response is, there is no church without its people. We are this church. We stand for inclusion and diversity and a wholeness that is comprised of many parts, all of them important, all needed. May our service to each other and to our wider community, made possible by our offering today, be a reflection of these, our values. Our sermon is entitled A Memorial Day Remembrance. The official history of Memorial Day goes like this. In 1868, 3 years after the Civil War ended, a group of Union veterans established a decoration day for the nation to adorn the graves of the war dead with flowers. A retired Union Major General, John A. Logan, set the date of the holiday for May 30, and the holiday's first observance was at Arlington National Cemetery. David W. Blight, the Sterling Professor of History at Yale and a Pulitzer Prize winner, has a different account. He traces the holiday to a series of commemorations that freed Black Americans held in the spring of 1865, after Union soldiers, including members of the 21st United States Colored Infantry, liberated the port city of Charleston, South Carolina. Digging through an archive at Harvard, Dr. Blight found that the largest of these commemorations took place on May 1st, 1865, at an old race course and jockey club in Charleston. It was used as a prisoner of war camp by the Confederacy, where hundreds of captive Union prisoners had died of disease and had been buried in a mass grave. On that day, the black residents of the city exhumed the bodies and gave them proper burials, erected a fence around the cemetery, and built an archway over it with the words, "Martyrs of the Racecourse." Some 10,000 black people then staged a procession of mourning, led by thousands of school children carrying roses and singing the Union anthem, "John Brown's Body." Hundreds of black women followed with baskets of flowers, wreaths, and crosses, and black men, including Union infantrymen, also marched. A children's choir sang spirituals and patriotic songs, including the Star-Spangled Banner. Quote, "The war was over, and a Memorial Day had been celebrated by African Americans in a ritual of remembrance and consecration," unquote. Dr. Blight wrote in a 2011 essay for the New York Times. The war they had boldly announced had been about the triumph of their emancipation over the slaveholders' republic. They were themselves the true patriots. The African American origins of the Memorial Day holiday were later suppressed. Dr. Blight found they were suppressed by white Southerners who reclaimed power after the end of Reconstruction and interpreted Memorial Day as a holiday of reconciliation, marking sacrifices by white Americans on both the Confederate and Union sides. Black Americans were largely marginalized in this narrative. Dr. Blight further wrote, "In the struggle over memory and meaning in any society, some stories just get lost while others attain mainstream recognition." His claim of this first Memorial Day observance is not universally accepted. No figure, go figure. The fact-checking website Snopes says of this 1865 remembrance, whether it was truly the first such ceremony and what influence, if any, it might have had on later observances are still matters of contention. So what I want to tell us today is that the Memorial Day holiday is about celebrating freedom and the sacrifices made to achieve it. Speaking at Arlington National Cemetery on Memorial Day 1871, the great African-American Frederick Douglass laid to rest what today we would call a false equivalency, the notion that both sides of the Civil War were engaged in a righteous struggle. He said, "We must never forget that the victory for the Confederate rebellion meant death to the Federal Republic." Douglass said, "We must never forget that the loyal soldiers who rest beneath this sod flung themselves between the nation and the nation's destroyers." Needless to say, a victory for the Confederacy would also have meant the continuation of slavery. Frederick Douglass was, as always, eloquent. He continued, "We are sometimes asked in the name of patriotism to remember with equal admiration those who struck at the nation's life and those who struck to save it, those who fought for slavery and those who fought for liberty and justice. I would not repel the repentant, but may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth before I forget the difference between the parties to that bloody conflict. If this war is to be forgotten, I ask in the name of all things sacred, what shall men remember?" Douglass understood why white Americans wanted the closure and peace of a mutually celebrated Memorial Day. Like every person of his time, he knew all too well the horrors of war. But he refused to accept a peace that honored mainly whites and that was literally built on the backs of black people. Yet within a decade of the end of the Civil War, it was common for white Union and white Confederate veterans to conduct memorial exercises together as a ritual of national reconciliation. Some towns, especially in the South, excluded blacks from Memorial Day celebrations, making Memorial Day, like so many others in the public sphere of those post-war Reconstruction days, a whites-only event. And so the forgetting began. And this was not an accidental forgetting, due only to the passage of time. It was an active suppression of a holiday that had been started in Charleston to celebrate liberation as well as sacrifice, freedom as well as suffering. And it was accomplished by a steady erosion of black people's political and economic freedom and physical safety, structural racism. And so this is why we do not know today the full history of Memorial Day. In the years after the war, there was a contest over how it would be remembered. African Americans lost. And as a continuation of their structurally marginalized status, they lost the public space in which to tell their own stories. This is a sad and indeed poignant observation. The country did need healing, desperately, much as we feel today. Don't we know that people need to feel like we were and we are one country? Yet this particular way of healing during Reconstruction, it laid the seeds of an idea that the good side of the war gives its participants an opportunity to practice courage, patriotism, service, sacrifice, and other virtues. In this view, every soldier is a hero, no matter who they fought for or what they fight for. This sort of idealization of war is what some decry. I certainly do. I suspect that the idea that war has its good side makes us more willing to go to war. Yet war, to me and to many, is always a bloody and tragic endeavor. And so we wonder, in what ways can we go back to the original days of Memorial Day? The holiday that we think was started by African Americans as a way of telling their own story of burying Union soldiers with dignity and celebrating a Union victory. In a great part, it was about their story of slavery and their story of liberation, their story of suffering and their story of great joy, their story of thankfulness, and above all, their story of hope. Imagine, Dr. Blight's research says there were 3,000 school-aged children at the first Memorial Day. Just 3 weeks after General Robert E. Lee surrendered, 2 weeks after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Like all children, these children symbolize new life and new possibilities, and these children also symbolized much more. They were going to be able to go to school. That was something their parents and grandparents had not been given. By 1870, 5 years after the war ended, the freed African American people would spend more than $1 million of their own money to start and support schools for their children. This was an incredible amount of money for a people who had started with literally nothing. These parents had such enormous pride in their children. Sending their children to school meant that the future would be different from the past. Sending their children to school meant that they would learn how to write their own stories. This would serve as a means for deeper healing of our society. And let me tell you about the Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed, an African-American UU minister, former professor of history, and a writer of note. In his memoir, In Between, a memoir of an integration baby, he contrasts the sense of shame still carried by so many African Americans with the pride with which Jews tell their own story of slavery and liberation. He observes, and I quote, "The Jews' liberation from Egyptian captivity, celebrated in the Passover meal, happened so long ago it has become an instrument of the sacred, a mythic narrative around which Jewish identity was formed. Yet African Americans have no narrative, no ritualized way of remembering the past, a way to express our thankfulness," and this is Mark Morrison Reed writing, as a black man, "a way to express our thankfulness for deliverance. No ceremony takes our suffering and mixes it with our triumphs to make a balm to ease our pain. How does one repair the psychic legacy left from being traded as a commodity, managed as a business, kept illiterate by law, and brutalized at will?" Close quote. It should be obvious why black people need opportunities to transform a history of trauma into a source of strength. Yet, as the Reverend Dr. Morrison Reed says, he's not just talking about black families here. White people, all people, need to tell and retell stories and to find their place within them. Any rich history has multiple dimensions, layers and layers of meaning. We read the story once and we see one thing. We read it again and we see something else. Over time, the story itself changes us, expands our capacity for empathy. Empathy is that precious ability to feel with another person while also recognizing their distinctness, to experience compassion and a sense of identity without erasing our differences. I've come to believe that empathy is the foundation of both justice, and peace. So in conclusion, as we've explored today, Memorial Day, in its earliest forms, it met a psychological and social need for a holiday, naming, marking, and celebrating the African American experience of slavery and liberation. And so on this Memorial Day weekend 2020, I invite you to be a part of this remembrance. How? By telling the stories you know of African American slavery and freedom, and American injustice and justice, and American racism and solidarity. Remember that suffering does not just include the slave years, but all the years that follow and still follow of structural racism. Yes, you speak about the suffering that's happening now, and remember all the people that have believed in the dream of liberty and justice for all and have sought a better way, many having fought for these freedoms in our armed forces, many who have lost their lives as we celebrate on Memorial Day. Let us remember and tell the stories as truthfully as we can, with all their complexity and contradiction, their ironies and their tragedies, their humor and their tenderness. Let us no longer seek a peace that is blamed on deliberate exclusion and forgetfulness. Instead, let us practice inclusion and healing memory. May for each of us this Memorial Day become the beginning of Memorial Days that celebrate this kind of remembrance. As we draw our service to a close, I'd like to offer a prayer of thanks and benediction. This comes from a UU ministerial colleague, the Reverend Kathleen Rowlands. Let us join our hearts and minds together in the spirit of prayer. O Holy One, that some call love, that unites all who are estranged and challenges all who preach division and exclusion. We perceive that unity is so often in the eyes of a child who sees neither race nor creed in any eyes that look back, but only whether these eyes are smiling or crying. Suffer the little children to come unto me, Jesus once said, for such is the kingdom of God. Yet every one of us had the eyes of a child at one time, had the vision, had that open acceptance. So before we put on the armor of our educations and our social class, and before we went to school and to war, and before we went to church or mosque or synagogue or temple, we were somebody's child, and we were loved. So, Holy One, help us to hold in our hearts and our hands all these mothers, sons, and daughters who are in harm's way this day, those who fight the wars of today and hope to lay eyes on those they love once more, and those who come home from the wars of yesterday and can't tell us what their eyes saw, and those whose eyes have been closed forever and whose families' eyes have been filled with tears every Memorial Day. On all sides, despite the evil that is done, despite the high ideals that are proclaimed, our faith is that all these children deserve to be called children of God. And we pause for a moment in silent affirmation of that faith as we listen to Jaime's postlude, and I certainly invite the many of you who can to join us for our coffee hour on the Zoom link. I'll see you there.